Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Belle. I am on the events team for Books for Magic. I'm so excited to be here with Becky and Iman to celebrate this incredible novel, Serendipity, Becky's sophomore novel. Okay, so if you need to use the restroom at any point, it is right there next to the moleskins. We're going to be doing a audience Q&A, so start thinking of questions now. And then after the talk tonight, Becky will be signing and personalizing books at the table next to the register where you checked in. And then if you're joining us virtually on the live stream, please buy a book in the description. Okay. All right, so writing this intro was very fun because I love this book and I also love Becky. We are friends, and so just massive fan of Becky as a human being. So as I'm sure you all know, it's such a joy to celebrate such a deserving, talented author. And Becky, this book really has it all. It has love, friendship, the ache of relationships past, the ache of relationships present, all with the backdrop of Sparkling Fire Island. This is a friend group that will stick with you forever and that I frankly wish I was a part of. So congratulations. I'm so thrilled we all get to celebrate you in Serendipity tonight. So another round of applause. Thank you so much, Iman. So Iman Hariri-Kia is a writer, editor, and author born and raised in New York City, a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree and award-winning journalist. She covers sex, relationships, identity, and adolescence. Her work has appeared in Vogue, New York Magazine's The Cut, Harper's Bazaar, Cosmopolitan, Teen Vogue, and more. Her debut novel, 100 Other Girls, was published in July 2022 to critical acclaim. Her sophomore novel, The Most Famous Girl in the World, will be published in September 2024 and is available to pre-order, which you can do at the desk over there. I'm so excited. And then Becky Chalsen is a development executive at the production company Sunday Night. She's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and now lives in New York City. Becky is a quadruplet and married to her high school sweetheart and identical twin, whose family spent summers on Fire Island for more than 3 decades. So let's give a big round of applause. So excited for this.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. It's really unbelievable. My very quick Books Are Magic history is that when I first moved back to New York, I guess it was 6 years ago at this point, I was working at WME in the books department, and and I was working for the agent Claudia Ballard, who represents Emma Straub, who's the novelist who owns the Books Are Magic chains and has written some of my favorite books ever. And when they had the launch of their first location, Books Are Magic, on Smith Street, I had just started working for Claudia, and she let me go to the opening party. And Zach, my husband, and I went, and we just were looking around the room, like totally starstruck. Like it was our first time in Brooklyn, probably my first time in Brooklyn ever. Loved it. And from that moment, I've just been so in awe of Emma Straub and how she champions authors in our community in Brooklyn. And then I'm just obviously the biggest Books Are Magic fangirl. If you know me, you know I love Books Are Magic. And so the fact that we could be here celebrating a book, but not only a book that I wrote, but a book that I wrote that now is in stores at Books Are Magic is truly a dream come true. And then to also be in conversation with my friend Iman, who's here tonight, who's amazing. Her books are fantastic. I read her newest book that comes out in September, so definitely pre-order it. So it should be a great night. So thank you all for coming.
Some might call this night serendipitous. Some might say it's kismet that we are here.
Certainly giving kismet.
Becky, do you think you might honor us with a reading before we begin the conversation?
Let's do that. Okay, I'm just going to read from the beginning. And I haven't read it in a bit, so sorry. I was supposed to practice today and I forgot. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. After 6 years in California, Maggie was surprised. She didn't expect to feel so charmed by the beach. Surprise was an all too familiar feeling for Maggie these days, though. Recently, it seemed all her would-be plans had stood up and flung themselves out the window, leaving rushing emotions in their wake. She rotated between bemusement and bewilderment, shock and fear and hope and panic. But Maggie was a writer, a master of spin, so the word she chose to encapsulate it all was simply surprise. It had a better ring to it. For instance, in the past week alone, Maggie had chosen not to feel depressed, but surprised as she handed in her security pass at the studio lot, saying goodbye to the Melrose office she'd spent more time in than her own home while working as Kurt's assistant for the past 2 years. She was not ashamed, but surprised. As she packed up she packed up her month-to-month rental in Los Feliz afterward, throwing what few belongings she had into her cardboard boxes and old suitcases, loading the luggage into the trunk of her bright blue Ford Escape. Its bumpers were still scratched and peeling. Sorry, I drive a blue Ford Escape, so I'm getting emotional. Oh boy. Its bumpers were still scratched and peeling from Los Angeles parking mishaps. She never quite mastered the art of the parallel park. Maggie was surprised and definitely not regretful as she pulled out of her driveway for the last time and made her way onto the darkened highway headed east, leaving visions of movie-making glory in her rear view for good, like roadkill on the 405. No, she was none of those things, those misfortunate mindsets. She couldn't be. She was simply surprised. And well, perhaps the biggest surprise of all was happening right now. Maggie sitting at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, toes in the sand, as the sun began to set on the first evening of an extraordinarily unexpected weekend on Fire Island, New York. Talk about a plot twist.
Becky, happy Pup Day. How does it feel?
It feels amazing.
It feels amazing to be here, right? You're a vision in blue. You match your book cover.
Always.
We've got an amazing crowd and even more people I hear on live stream.
Heck yeah.
Okay, we're live, everybody. Strike a pose. So, I wanted to congratulate you. I absolutely love Serendipity. I loved Kismet. I love this one even more. I didn't know it was possible. Fire Island is actually one of my favorite places ever, so reading about it is a dream. Can you, for audience members who maybe aren't as familiar with the back cover copy, give like your quick description, elevator pitch of what this book is about?
Yes. So Serendipity follows a group of friends from high school who reunite in their mid-20s to spend 3 weekends together in a share house in a town called Ocean Beach, Fire Island, and drama ensues.
No, I love it. Dun, dun, yeah. Everyone has a secret. So, first, we go to Kismet. Now we're in Ocean Beach. I'm sensing a theme. Where'd you first get the idea for this story?
So Kismet is my debut novel, and that takes place in a town called Kismet, Fire Island, where my in-laws have a house. They lived there for over 3 decades, and because I married my high school sweetheart, I've gotten to go with him since I was in high school also, and so I've spent countless summers there also, and it's always just been this magical place. And in COVID, I'm gonna back up a bit to answer your question. In COVID, and a lot of you guys were at my Kismet event, so you know the story also that we were in the pandemic, and Zach, my husband, was doing Zoom MBA on Saturdays, and we all were home, and I had really nothing to do but write a book, it seemed. And that June 2020, we were going out to Kismet for the first time that summer, and the first page of Kismet sort of just popped into my head. I had sort of been toying with the idea of writing a book, and it wasn't until that ferry that I was like, oh, this is it. Like, it's a romance beach read about twin sisters and a wedding, and all of these things I wanted to say.
Someone's gotta write a book about this.
It has to be a book.
And it's gotta be me.
Exactly. It has to be me. There's something about like taking the ferry, and you're sort of lost in time, and there's a magic to it, and I knew I wanted to explore it. And so we wrote Kismet. We were so lucky to sell it in July 2021. And it was really interesting because around that, like at that exact time, I was doing a lot of reflecting and celebrating, and Kismet we had sold, it was unbelievable. And a month before, the movie that I had been working on as the director's assistant had come out in theaters, and so we had a big party to celebrate that, and it was my first like a credit, like my name was in the credits at the end of the movie of assistant, and it was wonderful. And I was like, wow, like, these are 2 like major dream accomplishments. And just like at that point, it probably wouldn't have even been 3 years that I was in LA and deciding to sort of quit working in film and move back to New York with really no idea. Like, I'd started at WME mostly because my boss in LA told me I had to, and so she was like, you're working in this office, and I was like, okay, great. And so she helped me transfer. But I had sort of been thinking about working, and all my friends had left to work in tech because so much more money. I was like, so everybody was working in tech or marketing. I was like, maybe I'll just work in advertising. And I got this dream job to work at a production company and be able to work on this movie. And then with COVID, I was able to have this time and bandwidth and inspiration to write this novel. And if I had stayed in LA, I'm not sure either of those things would have happened. And so I sold Kismet, and I sort of also knew I wanted to write another book quickly so that I could have another chance to write a book. And so I was thinking that these two kind of forces were happening simultaneously, like these big reflective themes of like changing your dreams only to find new ones, but then also the idea that I wanted to write another book set in the beach. And so the town that I know second most best, I guess, in Fire Island is Ocean Beach, which my friends and I from high school did rent a share house for 3 weekends in the summer when we were like 25 or 26, and it was so fun. And we did one weekend in June, one weekend in July, and one weekend in August, which is exactly the structure of the book. And I remember it was probably by September of 2021 that I was like, oh, like this is a 3-act structure. I can write a book around this.
So did everything go to shit on that trip?
It actually didn't. And it was so fun. And like, our house was the bamboo house. So in this book, they say in the Serendipity house.
Oh, wow. The bamboo house is in this house.
Yes, the bamboo house.
Okay, Easter egg. Okay.
Yeah. My bamboo house friends. And it was so fun. And it was the first time that we had stayed in a share house, like a rental house with like guys and girls, our high school group, probably since after prom. And it was just amazing. Like being in, there's like rocket fuels and the sandbar, and we just came back each weekend with like dozens of new inside jokes, and it was just the kind of magical feeling. Like and being at that age, I think even the following summer we never would have been able to pull off like 3 weekends with just your friends, where you don't have a shower or a bachelorette party or a work trip, and or even just like working around the clock. And so it was sort of this magical moment in time that I wanted to kind of celebrate and cherish and revisit. And then again, that like great 3-act structure, because even on our time, like the second weekend I came back with a new job, and then the third weekend I came back with like a broken knee, and they were like dragging me around in a wagon through the streets of Ocean Beach. And so I thought it was interesting for characters to kind of, and as a reader, to kind of be able to take the same characters and pick up with them at 3 distinct points over the summer and see what's happened off island, what's happening on that island, and how they sort of changed.
No, I loved it. It was Shakespearean, and I really have to say, first of all, you broke your leg. That's a biking town. You went to a place where everyone bikes.
Yes, my dad is still upset about it. Okay. I should have stayed home.
Brave. Yeah, I love the way you described that, almost as if you wanted to capture like 3 very specific snapshots in time of those sort of like in-between years where you're still sort of coming of age. You haven't like figured out exactly what the rest of your life is going to look like yet. That really came across, I feel like, in the book. Did you return to Ocean Beach then as someone who's sort of on the other side of those years? And did you have like a really serious research trip where you drank rocket fuels and
we ate cold cheese pizza, we acted for research, we went to the bars for research, and I was wanting to like make sure I had video and photos of everything this time to kind of, when I was in the winter, to remember. And so I have like a ton of on my camera roll of just Zach like dancing in all these bars by himself, eating cold cheese pizza by himself. My research, it was so fun.
I have to tell you, I love how much of yourself and your story and your family that you put into these books. I want to circle back to you working in production because, spoiler alert, but not really, you find this out first chapter. One of our protagonists, Maggie, is also dealing with sort of leveling up a dream that she's had to work as a Hollywood writer for so long. So how much of your actual experience working for a production company did you put in this book?
Not a lot. I think it's the energy, that it's the idea of like my job. I'm so lucky that I love my job, and I've never experienced any sort of like toxic workplace setting, but you hear of it all the time. And being an assistant is just, it's amazing and it's awful, and you work crazy long hours for no pay, but you love it, and you're surrounded by people who also love nothing more than talking about movies and television shows, and you're all in LA for a very specific reason, the city of transplants, and it has this really fun energy to it. It can also be very suffocating, which is ultimately why I wanted to move back to New York. But I took mostly for Maggie, like, that energy of being an assistant in LA, where you just are working all the time, and there's a passion that is a necessity to being in that career path. But mostly I wanted to explore the idea of really anyone kind of changing the dream or growing out of the dream that they had. And I felt that LA or like Hollywood or like entertainment industry was the most personal to me, so something I knew or thought I could hopefully write or capture accurately and honestly from my own experience and my friends' experiences. But also I thought it was something that was really translatable. Like, I've had friends who like went to grad school and dropped out, or graduated from law school and don't want to be a lawyer, like all these sort of things. And I remember when I was later, years after I had left LA and I was writing Serendipity, which post I had already sold Kismet, and just being at that age and sort of being like, like not everybody, like you don't have to. It's sort of crazy that we think that at age 22 we'll know what we want to be when we're 32 still. Like there's so much time.
100%. I love so much what you said. I really do feel like when you're an assistant working in the industry you want to work in, every day is the best and worst day of your life. Like pick one and I'll tell you why. But yeah, no, I love that you allowed Maggie to accept that her dreams weren't going to look like what she had always envisioned, to make peace with that, and then to walk away and take on something new. I feel like we so rarely get to see characters break up with dreams in books. A lot of it is dream fulfillment instead, and I loved that arc for Maggie. Really well done. Also, way more to experience. I'm not good. Like, you guys have to see the shit that goes down in the shared house. Yeah, please. But I will say it's not just Maggie's journey that seemed very familiar to me. So in this book, we have another protagonist who I believe is marrying her high school sweetheart. I am looking at your high school sweetheart. Do we have a ring, sir? I believe we do. Okay, so a little bit of Liz in you as well. And then in addition to that, I know that you are a quadruplet. We've got another set of twins in this book. Is this fucking play about us? What's going on? I absolutely love that. Can you talk about putting pieces of your family and your friends into your work?
Yes, it was probably my favorite thing in writing Kismet was just making putting my own inside jokes into it, just to keep the process fun and exciting. And you never know if anybody will read the book, because you write it in solitude and hope that someone might buy it, and that one day you might be so lucky to be at an event celebrating and talking about it this way. But so in the short term, you're like, I better have as much fun as I can. And so I put all of my friends and family into my books, just the names and sort of towns or premises, and then the plot is fictional. But the funny thing for how I created the characters for Serendipity, by having two friends, Maggie and Liz. So in Kismet, the main characters are Amy and Joe, and the book's told through Amy, first person narration. And if you were at my Kismet event, you know the story that my name should be Amy, and it's not. My mom thought we're quadruplet girls, and my mom thought she was having two boys and two girls. And so they got to the hospital with only two girl names prepared, Rebecca and Margaret. I'm Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farms, which is still like iconic, I think, and like an homage. But then my parents had two more girls, and so they named the rest of my sisters are Margaret, Joanna, and Elizabeth, which are 3/4 of the Little Women March sisters. So I should be Amy. I'm not in the group.
I'm an individual.
Exactly. And so for Kismet, it was very clear that my main character's name would be Amy, and then I picked Joe to be her twin sister because I love the name Joanna and Joe. And so as soon as I finished writing Kismet and we sold it, I immediately knew that no matter what, I had to write a second book with Maggie and Liz, because it's only fair. We're very strict about fairness too. It's like part of being a quadruplet. So they
get this book out before Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly. And I had sort of at the same time been curious about challenging myself in my second book to do alternating narrators and to do a third person book instead of the first person book, which Kismet was, and it was so much harder. I think my next book, if I write a third book, it'll be first person.
We're gonna get into that. Can I ask you some craft questions actually? I'm curious, this is a selfish question as someone who's publishing her second book. What was your experience working on your second book versus your first book?
It was so much harder.
Oh my god, it's so much harder.
I feel like it won't be harder for me, and it was so much harder.
Completely. I was like, I'm not like other girls. This is gonna work out so well for me. Cut to like pacing with my agent on the phone, being like, it's not a book. It's not a book. So how tell me more.
it was wild. And the logistics of it is just it's crazy that anybody can write a book a year. The fact that you're promoting one book and editing your second book is just it's nuts. Like I was on tour for Kismet and doing my Serendipity edits and also have a full-time job and trying to be a human and a sister and a wife and a family member. And I was like, this is insane. Like this is like so much. Yeah. So just from a practical level, it was a lot of that. Like, no, I can't come to this. No, I have to just work on my book. And so and that's like my acknowledgements and my author's note is really, it's sort of an apology to all my friends. I haven't seen anyone in years. And so it was hard, from a practical level. And then there was just something, writing 2 alternating narrators was hard. At first I thought, when I was I'm a big outliner, always. Like I'm very structured.
Same. Okay.
It's about, 3 hours.
Thank God we have another plotter here. None of that pantsing nonsense. Yeah, okay. Freaks.
Yeah. So nerve-wracking. And so I always knew, and what I love the structure for Serendipity, that's like where the book came from, is these 3 weekends. What it does is make for a very difficult plot, like, because if you move, it's like a house of cards. Like if you move one item from week 2, it changes everything and the way things can happen. And so a big development edit from my brilliant editor, Cassidy, was changing when something happened and moving it to the 3rd weekend instead of the 2nd weekend, which is just a knot that you have to unravel or the braid you have to undo and then braid. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I can do this, but it's gonna take some time. And so it was sort of getting into the weeds on it. It was just work, but it's so worth it. You can tell, like, I'm so proud of that change. It just, there were a few changes like that were a bit bigger than some of my notes for Kismet had been, and so there was just a bit more to do. And then on top of being on tour, and like, okay, I'll get it done, but we did it.
Yeah,
that's great.
Let's quickly shout out Cassidy Sachs.
Yeah.
Can we get a round of applause for Cassidy? I'm going to want to know what that thing you moved is off screen from the booksellers only watch your stuff area, because I'm very curious. Okay, so I have to call you out for a sec though. You said that you wrote 2 alternating POVs. However, I'm very thorough. I like to prepare for my events. And I counted, you have not 1, not 2, but 11 to 12 POVs in this book. Every time I got another POV, I was like, oh my gosh, how did you not go crazy in your head? How did you differentiate between all of the different voices? Okay, voices, probably the wrong word, but the different characters. And something that you said really resonated about how as authors, you're very often writing a project, editing a project, and promoting a project at the same time. How did you do that and throw 12 different characters into the mix?
Yeah, it was the beauty of an outline, and also the sort of like dagger of the outline also is that, again, like for each change I made, I had to then make sure that the larger outline worked in terms of when all the voices. So the other POVs that I was talking about are basically all of the friends get their own little chapter, like a vignette for their life. And as soon as I got to the first one, it hadn't even really been in my original outline. It had been something I had sort of been thinking about in the back of my head. And then when I got to the place where the first friend's voice comes in and he gets his own little quick chapter, it had just come to me. And it's PJ, the friend, and I was like, I just love him and I need to hear him right now.
I loved him too.
And then that sort of set off, and I was like, oh, this will be great. And speaking of Emma Straub, who owns this bookstore, her book, The Vacationers, is one of my favorite books of all time. And I always think about how in her novel she has this really beautiful moment where there's a character who, The Vacationers is about a group of family and friends who go to Mallorca, Spain for a week on vacation, and there's a character who's this like girlfriend who the family doesn't really like, and you sort of are always kind of like, oh, like who, like boo-hoo this character. And then you get to a moment where you really understand that character and who she is and what she's going for, and she becomes like the best person in the book, for me at least. And it was so powerful as a reader to kind of have that like 180 almost, that I was always like, man, if I could be so lucky to write like a friendship book, I would love to have those sort of moments where you think you know someone, you think you know somebody, and then all of a sudden you're given a new piece of information that like unlocks like who they really are and what they really represent and what their role is in this friend group or in this novel. And so I really wanted to do that. And so then I was like, shoot, I have to like plan out, because once I did one, I was like, well, we have to be fair, like I need to do all of them. And so how to kind of balance that, again, like braiding of like Maggie Liz, friend, Maggie Liz, friend again was sort of, there's a fly, sorry, sort of beautiful puzzle.
No, I absolutely agree. I also loved that it made it so that like the world continued to move on outside of this like monumental friendship moment. Like these characters became so much more complex than they weren't story devices to move the story forward. They were living their own lives and having their own main character moments off of the page, and it really to me helped crystallize just the world of Ocean Beach. I absolutely loved it. Did you have a favorite POV that you wrote?
I think Robin, who's the girlfriend who
I love that.
she's the most fun to write. She's this girlfriend. I hope that you guys love her as much as I love writing her, and there's just a fun moment that she gets, and I think her chapter really, I hope readers will find, it says that exactly, that like vacationer sort of moment of like, oh, like I had sort of misread her, and because I think we all sort of misread people sometimes too, and so I just thought there was something sort of powerful in Robin's.
Robin, at first I was like, oh, comic relief. Then we got into her head and I was like, not so comic. So I really enjoyed her. Also, just you did such a good job painting a picture of her, because I thought I had her read to filth before I got in her head. I literally was like, I know this bitch so well. So no, truly, now that you draw that through line from The Vacationers and brought it full circle to Books Are Magic score, I see that so much. I absolutely love that. Was there a scene, without spoiling, that was your favorite to write, and then one that you struggled writing?
Yes, my favorite to write was probably there's a chapter with two friends, Brenna and Quinn, when they're like playing tennis, and I think that was probably my favorite. It's probably the only chapter that didn't ever didn't change much. Like it's pretty much been the same the whole time.
Interesting.
And I think because they realized in that chapter they really discussed the theme that I thought was sort of the most important.
Yeah. No, flies we hate. Who let that in? Yeah, no. Absolutely not.
They sort of discussed that main theme I wanted to talk about, which was that idea of having a friend group that, and this age and this summer, and the beauty of it, and it's something that's so interesting because I wrote the book, I guess I was 29 when I started it. I'm now 31. The characters are like 25, 26. And I feel like the last 6-ish years, like you just changed so much in such an amazing way. And I have such a feeling of gratitude for my late 20s when I was in New York with my sisters and my husband and all of our friends and family who are from the Westchester area. And there's such a magic to it. And now, and I was joking, and I was telling my editor about this too, like my sister Maggie, who's here tonight also, bought a house in Larchmont, and so she's moving to Westchester. She moved to Westchester. She's left the city.
Congrats!
I mean, and I thought a really good job about not making it about me. And I'm so proud of you. Like, we'll look at houses. Like, you can buy a house, and like I'll be okay with it. And then I walked into her house, and I burst into tears, like full sobs for too many minutes. Like it was really good. And I was just like, wow, Becky, like you're so lucky that you can be so upset that like you've had such an amazing time of your life, and I'm so excited for the next chapter, like the stuff that we don't even know to be excited about yet. But I love being able to pause and reflect and like feel that gratitude of like, man, like how lucky are we that there was an era that we loved so much that we like will be sad to miss. It's so bittersweet, like, you know, time it's impermanent. That's the whole point of life, and so like being able to reflect on that, I really wanted to do in my book, and so I do that. This is such a long way of answering your very short question. It's the Brenna and Quinn chapter, and let me know when you get to it and if you feel that energy. The hardest part was the first chapter. I rewrote the first chapter so many times that it's really, and I knew this when I decided to write a friend group novel with 8 main characters. I was like, it's gonna be tough to introduce them all in a way that the reader will remember who each character is, and in sort of a gentle way where you're always introducing just a few more details about each character and making sure all their names were distinct enough that they wouldn't be confusing. And the second I changed one character's name, so PJ used to be called Joey, but we changed it because there's Georgie, but he used to be Little Greg. Anyway, there's lots of Little Greg, you guys, there's Little Greg.
Not to be confused with Big Greg of Succession. Like, they're not tiny.
And so there was all these different, there were a few different names. And when you change one, I really don't like to have main characters that have the same first initial unless it's intentional, like Maggie and her ex-boyfriend Mac. That was like something that they bonded over and they called themselves Eminem. Otherwise, I think as a reader, it can get confusing, and so it's something I'm always hyper aware of. And so when I changed one name, I had to then go back and change the others, and so it became sort of complicated. And again, in that like entrance moment, but yeah, I think it's in a place I'm proud of.
And do you count the text conversation at the front of the book towards your first chapter? Like, are you including that?
Oh no, the first chapter, that was probably the most fun to write. Also, is that prologue. The book begins with a text exchange, which I thought was that's how the weekends begin always. It's like, all right, who got the groceries? Like, what ferry are we taking? Like, we always joke, it's like the weekend begins when the group chat begins. And so I really wanted to start the book that way. But that was also sort of an interesting like experiment to myself, and just of how you can kind of introduce characters over text in a way that's not hopefully confusing. And I think I pulled it off. So you'll let me know when it's great.
No, totally. And it's funny because you're the one that was the favorite to write is towards the end of the book, and the one at the beginning. I have to say though, like I really loved when you opened with the text chains, because what happened was as I went and started figuring out how people were, I went back to the text conversation to figure it was like my own little treasure map of foreshadowing.
The lines like, oh, meet me in the kitchen, and you're like, oh, who did she say that to? Like, oh, wait, now I know the room.
No, completely. It made it even more fun. It was interactive, like a game. I loved it. I'm getting the wrap up single, which is my least favorite thing because I love to gab. I have so much I could ask you, but I first want to know, maybe because you just talked about your sister buying a house and moving a little bit further away, do you have any advice for someone who is going to start being in like a long distance friendship? Because what really struck me the most was like, we were talking a lot about like friend group story, but I'd argue that this is a love story between Liz and Maggie. Like this is a platonic love story about two like best friends, like soulmates in a lot of ways, finding their way back to one another. And it can be really difficult, I think, when we exit this like special in-between part of our lives and the people we love start to move away. And do you have any tips for how to maintain that magic, that connection?
Such a good question, and it's such an important theme of the novel, is like how Liz and Maggie ultimately find their way back to each other after years of distance. And I think my advice, and what I think the book hopefully supports also, is just to like give those friendships like so much ease and grace and like peace, and not to kind of work yourself up. I'm so lucky to have friends who live all over the country. I have so many friends still in LA. I have a friend who lives in DC who's here tonight, who surprised me. Julia's here. Oh. And I feel like it's such a great example where like whenever I get together with my friends who aren't, fellow Brooklyn, New York City residents, it's never like, oh, and like you didn't text me about this. It's like always like, oh, tell me every single thing that's happened since I saw you, and like fill me in on everything. And if you pick up exactly where you left off with sort of no judgment. And I also love an Instagram DM, as most of you in this room probably know. I'm constantly in everyone's DMs. But I'm constantly like Snapchatting, like engaging with people in their day-to-day life on like online, and all these ways that we have, we're in 2024, it's so easy to stay connected. But also it was sort of finding those moments when you can connect in person and not, like sort of just picking up exactly where you left off, and not being so worked up about, like, oh, I didn't hear from them. It's like, it's okay. Like you can be living your life sort of rotating like in like, rotating cups almost. And then that's not a metaphor, but you know what I mean.
And what a better reunion to see all your friends IRL than a book launch. Am I right, guys? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to take some questions from the audience. Selfishly, I'm like, I hope no one has any questions, and I can ask all the questions. But if anyone has a question for our dear Becky, now is the time to ask. Anybody? Yeah, Laura.
Hi guys. This is a. Oh my god, loved it so much. I've been reading Serendipity all day. But this is a kind of selfish question, as obviously a fellow author, but from a pantser to a plotter, I would love to hear a bit more about how this came together for you structurally, just because we talked about it, there are so many POVs. It's dual, but then there are 12.
Was that all in the original outline, and how did you envision that, and how did you revise that before really diving into drafting, I guess?
So for those watching on the live stream, it's a question about how Becky was able to bring the structure of the novel together with all of the different POVs. And also, I'm sorry I called you a freak, Lauren. No, shout out Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. Such a great question. Yeah, so basically, I always answer a question with the answer to a question you didn't ask first. For Kismet, I remember when I started writing, and I just had no idea how long a book should be, and my agent Sabrina, who's amazing, was like, yeah, just like 70 to 80,000 words, and I was like, what the heck is that? Like, I have no idea how to quantify like 70,000 words, and so I sort of figured out that like it would be about 30 chapters, and that's how I did Kismet. And Kismet, in my novel Kismet, the main characters are turning 30, and so I was like, perfect, 30 chapters for their 30th birthday, like love an inside joke to myself. And so then, quite literally, when I started Serendipity, I was like, okay, fabulous, 30 chapters. There's 3 weekends. That means each weekend gets 10 chapters. And I will plot each weekend out the way I would sort of schedule an itinerary if I was going to Ocean Beach for the weekend. So if there's like a sandcastle competition, or like pizza night, or like barbecues, like different activities throughout the Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday departure.
I just know you planned the best vacations.
So, I can confirm. And so I sort of went very granular on that level of like, how do we get enough chapters? Because I feel like that's my fear with pantsing, is like, if you start a book, but then like, how do you just keep making sure that there's enough plot and story? And so I always need to make sure I have like a full book's worth of plot first, and then I can start writing. And I think probably as I was still deep in my like outline, like very detailed, chapter 1, 2, 3, like weekend 1, 2, 3, big kind of columns, I decided to do the multiple alternating POVs, and that became a lot more just like stressful, and sort of figuring out like when you would introduce a new one, and what information you would give in each chapter. But it was a lot of sort of like slotting around and being, sort of loose as I can be, which is not quite loose, and trying to move them around until I got to a place where I thought it like worked. And then
you're like, decided to go a little crazy.
Exactly.
No, it's I first of all, I love that you decided to give yourself more work. You're like, you know what this needs? More work. But yeah, no, I can't believe that you got into it and then decided to sort of deconstruct and read.
Yeah.
Wow. Can we get another question? Alice, hi.
On the point of the other POVs, were there any where, I know you said like with TJs, you like knew it had to happen then. Were there any that you moved around after, or like are there any extras that you wrote that you like had 2 options and you decided to go to one really over the other?
Yeah.
So the question is about whether or not we moved around some POVs or added or subtracted any POVs.
Yes.
For those at home.
Yeah, great question. For the most part, they sort of stayed, except for in the beginning. It's at the end of weekend 2 and the beginning of weekend 3, which was the big edit from Cassidy of moving around when a certain big like plot kind of set piece happens. And so I had to kind of, like Cam's chapter is one that sort of changed places. And the content of Cam's chapter also changed a few times too in the edit, which was fun. And that's what's so fun about writing, is like, I know so much more about Cam than anyone else will. Like, I know so much about this man. He's so sweet. But you can't put all of it. And then there's a chapter for Roseanne, who is the mother-in-law, and she is amazing and such a great character too. And she didn't have a POV. She had a POV originally. We cut it, and then we put it back in. And that felt like a really just like validated moment where I was like, yes, like we get it, because I loved her chapter.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I saw the argument of like, just stay with the friends. And then it worked, I think, structurally, where I was like, I just need another little filler, because I think I go like Maggie, Roseanne, and then back to Maggie. And so I was like, we need Roseanne.
No, when it arrives, it's a perfect treat. I was literally mouth agape. I was like, oh my gosh, is this who I think it is? And also, as someone planning a wedding, to have the mother-in-law pop in for a quick visit, I was like, ooh, she wrote this for me.
I will give a disclaimer that's not based on my mother-in-law who is here and I adore her. She's amazing. No bearings to Roseanne is fully work of fiction. I love her also.
We are creative writers. You in the back.
Hi, thank you. This is a no pressure question because I don't want to force you to do another on tour and editing and promoting everything. But you've obviously now written 2 books with a lot of similar themes and a lot of yourself in them. So the first question is, do you see yourself writing a 3rd book? And if so, do you think you're going to continue in those veins, or do you want to try something totally different?
Okay, I'm obsessed because I was gonna ask this as well. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're working on next. You're working on a 3rd book. Is it gonna be similar vein, set in another town in Fire Island, or are we going to the Pines?
Yeah, so the project that I've worked on the past year has been a co-writing situation, which is really fun because I can't promote it or really say much about it at all. So I'm almost done with it, and then I won't need to be on tour for it next year, which is sort of wonderful and very exciting. And it's been a really fun process because it's very similar to my day job, which is in film TV development and kind of working, taking characters and working on structure and kind of stakes and plotting. And so that's been really fun, and that will come out next spring. And again, I won't be on tour for it, which is wonderful. As far as my own 3rd book, I don't know, which is very freeing.
Ooh.
You would think that would really stress me out because I'm such a believer in a 5-year plan, but I don't have my next book. I have some ideas, and I think maybe I could see myself going back to the beach. I could see myself doing a winter novel. I don't know. I would love to explore. I'm sure that it will continue. It'd be fun. I think all of my novels will inherently explore sisterhood, since that's what's defined me more than anything. Just being a quadruplet, it's how I view the world. There's no choice but to, because that's the only life I live, which is this beautiful life where I'm surrounded by family. So that will always be a big theme. I love throwing twins in, or maybe I'll do quadruplets, but again, that structure is scary. So I think, yeah, if I really dig into it.
But after a big break, you'll be ready.
That's sort of interesting. High school sweethearts, always a big theme for me. And
Shout out
then, shout out Zach. And then, yeah, so I think, yeah, just going. I'm also sort of interested in like living a bit more, and then finding more things to write about, because I do feel like my lived personal experience for the last 4 years has just been sitting by myself writing these books. And I think I might need to like touch grass a bit and then have more books to write.
Oh my god, I feel like people are always like, why are writers always writing about writers and editors and book people? And it's like, because we don't know anyone else. We don't need anyone else to sit in our holes and write.
I also feel like it's hard, but I think, because I also feel like people are always like, oh, like all these books are just about writers, or like people who work in publishing. And it's like, writers are such good characters, because if you're like, Kismet, Amy's like an accountant, but it's not like we're at work with her. I'm like, how much of a workplace not? Like, your book does perfectly as like a media workplace. But like, I don't know that I don't know. Anyway. No, you need the characters to be able to like go on a journey, and like they can't be tied to like a 9-to-5 job. Like,
well, people also say write what you know, and then every debut novelist holds up a mirror and they're like, me. Including myself. I will just call that out myself. But no, completely. And I love that you are taking a beat to touch grass, as you said at the very beginning of our chat. It's great. Writing a book a year is a lot of work.
Massive.
Yeah, and it really is. You can settle into a routine where you're doing more writing than thinking, and I love that you're taking a beat to dream up something big.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I'm so lucky that I love my like day job in film TV too, where I'm constantly reading and learning also, and so I'm sort of just very lucky.
Very
just enjoying it all.
Amazing. Oh, sorry, I'm just like touched. Okay. So, any more questions? Oh, hi. So good to see you. Morgan's here.
It's June, and Becky, I'm wondering if there's like something that signals to you that summer has started, like a song, a sense of.
Yeah, do you want to read it? The question for the live stream friends is, if it's June, so is there something that signals summer, the start to summer? I have so many answers. It's like we went to Fire Island for Memorial Day. Like, that's always the big kickoff. We're like back at the beach. I have a sunburn on my shin that's like not fading. And then I also feel like it's that season when you leave work and the sun is out still, and you have all these I have all these big plans for the work I'm gonna finish when I get home, and then by the time I get home, I've already texted Zach like, let's get a drink outside, and I don't do any work after work. It's impossible.
I thought you were gonna say like taking the LIRR and seeing all the teenagers like trying to quietly drink.
What's on for you?
Wow, that's a great question. Like I feel like just the smell of sunscreen in Fort Greene Park, like walking around Brooklyn and everyone just smells like suntan lotion and sweat in the best way. I'm like aroma, yeah, absolutely. And similarly to you, the beach. Like I just think that there's nothing more cathartic than reading on the beach. So that was such a good question. Yeah. And Billie Eilish's lunch. It's lunchtime. Okay. Any more questions? Sabrina.
Hello.
Hi.
Becky, what are you
Sabrina.
What did you say? Becky, what are you reading?
The question from my agent Sabrina Tate.
Wait, also another one of my questions.
Oh, Sabrina.
So amazing. Thank you, Sabrina.
Sabrina and I met as interns at WB, which is the best story ever. And the best thing about working in entertainment and like publishing and all these fields is like the relationships that you meet when you are like Maggie, an assistant, and that like stay with you your whole career, and that it's the most unbelievable. Like I wish I could like tell our intern selves that like we're here right now. It's
Okay,
amazing.
we brought our intern too.
Oh my god! Round of applause for interns.
We don't have a chair for her, but she's here.
The start of someone's book.
I'm reading. Okay, what I'm reading now. I'm gonna answer your question with what I think everybody should pre-order for their summer read. For what they're also reading is Humor Me by Kat Shook, who's also here tonight. Kat is I'm so grateful. There's so many author like besties in the house right now. Just like I can't believe we have so many friends who also are like, oh, and they also wrote an amazing book that will change your life and are a genius. And I also have their cell phone number. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Like humble brag. We know authors.
Kat's debut novel, if we're being honest, came out on the same day that Kismet came out, April 18th, 2023. And so we've just had like the most unbelievable friendship. Since then, she also works in like book to film development. And so her sophomore novel, Humor Me, is out on July 9th. And I think it sort of speaks in conversation with Serendipity in a really fun way, because it follows Presley, who's an assistant in like a comedy booking department at a TV show. And she's also like, she's living in New York as an assistant, kind of on that same like mid-20s magical, like messy summer grind. It's so good, and you guys will all love it. So July 9th, pre-order now, and yeah, Humor Me, catch up.
I know what we're all doing after this. Amazing. Do we have time for more questions? Yes, right? 2 more. Okay. Amazing. Oh, so many questions now. Hi.
Hi. I have a goofy question for both of you. Becky for Serendipity, and Iman, if you're willing to share for Most Famous Girl. I was wondering, in the like film adaptation versions of both of these books, what the final song that plays during the end credits would be.
I'm really terrified of this amazing question. Please go first. Oh, I have an answer. Okay, so the question for the live stream was, the question for the live stream was, if your books were movies, TV shows, what would be the final song in that like end scene and roll end credits moment? Mine would be, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanked on the title of it.
Oh,
but
sing
it's,
it.
Taylor Swift. So Alex gets us. What's the speaking out song that Taylor had at their I had the time of my life.
Oh,
Long Live by Taylor Swift. Long Live by Taylor Swift. What's that here? Long Live by Taylor Swift, which is like, the ode to like, look at us now, like our friendship reunion. And I also feel like you would leave that theater like, yes. It would be amazing. Oh my god. It also was the end credit song for the Eras Tour movie, so I'm probably just copying. She did a great job, and I will take the same choice.
That's the same great idea. Yeah. Don't worry. I think mine, and take of this what you will, I think it would probably be Psycho Killer. Totally really different, but also fun. So, and that's really my novel, like fun vibes, but kind of psycho and popular.
So good.
So yeah, thanks, Becky. One more question. Yes.
Yes. Becky, did you realize that you look just like Cinderella now?
Thank you. So sweet. For the live stream. She's look like Cinderella. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and feel free to take more questions.
I think we can fit maybe one more in. Yes, our intern friend.
Kind of just following up from the earlier question, as someone who's written 2 books now and has kind of like moved around careers, talks about it, explores it even in, your books, what's something you do wish you told your intern self and Sabrina?
So the question was, what is a piece of advice or something that Becky could tell her intern self?
I love this question. I think my answer would be to like make as many friends as you can. And I had heard somebody once say, like, somebody had asked once, like, is our mentor still like the most important thing in the entertainment industry or like probably other industries? All I can speak to is my experience. And the answer that my friend had given was so smart. It was like, it's actually more important to surround yourself by like-minded peers than necessarily like mentors. Like, it's always, of course, important to like find the people whose careers you admire and want to try and emulate after. But the best and like most important part is finding the people who are sitting next to you and like working the long hours, or you can text on the weekend if your boss's flight got canceled and you need like a last minute greeter, like at the airport, like whatever the things are, last minute hotel reservations, all of the kind of crazy things. But then also those are the people who, when you're hiring for new jobs, like they're the assistants and the coordinators are the people who find that out. And so finding people who are at your level and can relate and you can kind of be in each other's corners and then be each other's champions. Is like the most important part.
I can't tell you how much that resonates. It's all about the group chat, guys. Protect the group chat at all costs if you take one thing away from this. Can we get a round of applause for Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Books Are Magic, for having us.
Very quickly close us out. That was amazing. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Becky. All right, so if you are on the live stream, you can buy a book in the link in your description. Thank you. And up there, we have 100 other girls, Iman's book, and we have Kismet and Serendipity for sale. So come buy some books and pre-order The Most Famous Girl in the World, please.
So good.
And Humor Me by Kat Shook, awesome.
Yeah.
And so Becky, I'm gonna bring Becky over. So chat with her when she's there because we're gonna start the signing line in this kind of cubby that my coworker is about to point to, which is right over there. And then we will start breaking down the chairs. So just pick up your belongings, and that is it. Thank you all so much.
There's like a Fire Island postcard. There's lots of merch, so please take.